Hi, everyone. My name is Xue Haipei. I'm the president of United Chinese Americans. This is a moment that we have expected for a long time. We have talked about with our three Chinese American elected state legislators for a while. And finally, we put everybody together today on the weekend, and really appreciate your three's time and many others on this website. This is a hugely important issue for the Chinese Americans, especially for the immigrant communities. As you all know, that Chinese Americans are way underrepresented in the American political process. Some of them are some of those are external difficulties, but some are imposed by our own selves. I can tell you that out of 435 U.S. Congress members, only three of them are Chinese Americans, and that is way below our national average. And on a state level, I tried to add mentally how many state legislators of Chinese descent we have. My very rough number, don't count me on that, is about 20 of them. So there are about 20 Chinese American, 25 at most, Chinese American state legislators. And of them, the three who are the first generation are all here. In fact, if we take off California, there's barely any Chinese American state legislators, and maybe plus a few, maybe 2 or 3 in New York State. So that's where we are. And beyond that, individual elected officials, our community's general voter registration, voter turnout are miserably low, actually at the bottom line of this country. At the same time, our community is going through a lot of difficulties. This country is going through a lot of difficulties. And we have a huge challenge in many aspects of our life as a community. And all of this really demands that these three great Chinese American first generation immigrants, they should be our example in how we can tackle the difficulties that we face in this country. There are many ways to deal with that. However, the civically participating and politically engaging our community is one of the surest way to address the huge problems we have today and to set example for our next generations. So thank you, all the three of them here. My very first question to you three, and maybe you can go by this order in for the rest of this talk today. First by Yalu, second by Lady, and the third by Wu Tao. My first question actually is not a question. Can you give us 1 or 2 minutes, but no more than 2 minutes time to make an introduction of yourself in your own words, things like where you come from, what school you have, what career path you have taken, up to the point you decide to run for public office. Please, Yalu.
谢谢 UCA 组织这次特别有意义的活动。大家好，我叫亚刘，中文是刘广亚，河南妹子，我是大学毕业，南开大学毕业，来到了美国，先是读社会学的研究生，后来到了北卡州立读博士，然后我就到了北卡的杜克大学法学院，做 faculty， 在那里工作了大概10年。在做 faculty 期间，我那是全职工作，然后就读了一个就是博士，就是法学的博士，拿了法学博士之后，我就开了自己的律所。2019年的时候，有个很偶然的机会，有人问我有没有兴趣选，当时是 Kerry 的市议员，我当时也是初生牛犊不怕虎，然后我就去选了，也是靠了当地社区华人的力量嘛。 就是扫街，就是募捐，动员了很多选民，选上了州议员。到了2022年，就去年选上了就是州议员。我是北卡的第一位，就是我们当时有2个是第一位女州议员，就亚裔的女州议员，当然是华人的第一位女议员。就是很高兴在这里有这样的机会跟大家交流。
Thanks. Yeah. Lily, please.
嗨，大家好，我叫齐丽丽，是马里兰州众议员今天非常高兴有那么多的朋友上网，现在正好是大概吃晚饭的时候吧，大概差不多7点是 Eastern Time，so thank you for joining us。我首先要跟大家说一下 ，I feel much more comfortable expressing myself in English. First of all, I have lived here for over 30-some years, and also everything I have done in my professional life.On the jobs or as a politician is all in English, so I feel much more comfortable. I hope it's okay with you.
Go
and
ahead.
If I need to revert to Chinese, I will try my best. Okay.
No problem.
So I grew up during the Cultural Revolution in Shanghai, China, and I came here by myself. Hello? Could everyone please mute yourself if you're not speaking? Thank you. So I came here as part of the wave of Chinese students going abroad to study abroad after China opened its door to the rest of the world and started its economic reform. And of course, first decade was tremendously difficult. But once I established myself, once my family established ourselves, I wanted to fully integrate myself into the American society. So I started getting involved in local communities by serving on boards, by getting involved with the OCA, the Organization of Chinese Americans, as a civil rights organization to learn about Asian American rights and opportunities and all of that. And that got me into political involvement. I served on a lot of boards throughout my careers of different jobs and different career paths. I continued to get involved in local communities. So that ultimately led to my decision to run for office. So it was not an overnight decision to become a politician. So I'm very glad to be here to share with you my journey.
Thanks so much, Lily. Chao. Somebody need to unmute Wu Chao's.
我可以，好的，海培，我就英文、中文都可以，所以我想，因为观众都是能讲中文的，我就讲中文。我叫武超，是湖北黄冈人，96年上大学的，上中国科技大学，到中科大毕业之后去新加坡待2年，接着2003年来美国，今年恰好是我来美国20年，在马里兰大学读完博士之后是电子工程计算机系，接着就在马里兰工作生活。我觉得我个人的经历其实比较简单，当时就是说我有家有孩子之后，我就想怎么参与当地的社区的活动，我就参加了我们这的 HOA 叫 Homeowner Association 的 board， 之后就在这个 HOA 任职了几年。在2017年、2018年的时候，我们 school board 有很多空缺，我就想一直想让别人出来选，因为亚裔很少有人选，尤其第一代基本没有人，所以我很想推崇大家出来选，但是一直没有找到合适的人出来选。我就想，他推人不如推己，对不对？那就只好自己站出来。所以我们就让了一个非常 massive 的 grassroots campaign。接着，2018年就是当选我们 Howard County School Board， 我们 Howard County 将近有1个 billion 的 budget， 有58000个学生，就是规模非常之大。在 School Board 上任命了4年之后呢，我就2022年又竞选我们州里的议员，就马里兰州议员，跟莉莉奇同是州议员，但是我们不是在一个选区。当然也最后比较惊险的，当然成功的胜选了。也就是说，这个选上当然有偶然的机会，也有必然的机会，因为自己也努力，对社区感兴趣。我觉得这么多年的经验告诉我们，我们华人在美国要发声，要参与，要 we need to be on the table and have our voice and representation.
谢谢吴超，谢谢。You guys are great. You guys all keep the time perfectly. So I'm very grateful for that. Our next question I have for you three is, And you know this question will come, and I want to know. I really want to know. I know three of you very well. We are friends for many years, and in case of Lily, we know each other of decades actually. But I never actually asked you this question: what triggered your decision to that decision of running? I know to some of you may be a long process. To some of you, may have thought about on and off. But what finally has made that, I wouldn't say fatal decision, but a very major decision? Tell us how you reached that point and what is the process.
我呢就是跟吴超和 Lily 经历也非常相似，就是一直在就是做社区工作，做了很多年，就是20年，一直做志愿者，在当地的华人社团里面也做了很多工作，就组织了很多文化活动，就是春节晚会啊，这一类的，就像我们美食节之类的，所以就是说我可能就是做公共服务，我觉得就跟社区服务其实是同一个，就只不过上升了另外的一个平台，所以也不是一个特别吃惊的事情。就是，但是呢，就是对于我来说，就是 what's the trigger， 就是有人来问我，就正好有一个职位来选，从我的经历上来觉得，就是说，因为我也鼓励过其他的人去选，但是就是很多华人，就是我问过的人，就跟我说 no， 就是我觉得就是其实有的时候有一个机会或者一个职位出来了，那么有个人告诉你，不管这个人是华人也好，或者说是就是美国的主流的政客也好，来问你了，所以就是一个很好的机会。就是说，我觉得就是我就鼓励就是在场的，就是如果有人来问你，就是 would you consider running？Just say yes， 就是 we take a lot of us to say yes， 就是 I'm yes, and it wasn't easy to do. It wasn't an easy decision to make. I'm glad I did it. I just see the benefits of having a voice at the table that motivates me, you know, and I definitely feel the sacrifice along the way, and I see why people say no. And we really need more of us to step up and to say yes when you are asked to run, when opportunities come up.
Yeah,
so I guess it's my turn. Okay. So I want to echo a lot of what Yalu talked about, which is, for me, it was not, as I said earlier, it was not an overnight decision. I started by getting involved in Asian American organizations and learned about civil rights and all that. And I started by serving on nonprofit boards, by serving on the county's local boards, you know, commissions and committees. And it was, for me, a way to learn about America, about American society, about how communities are built, how decisions are made, right, at very micro local level that affects my everyday life. And I found that absolutely fascinating because a lot of us, besides job and the family, became pretty isolated from the larger society, really. You know, if you did not make an intentional decision to educate yourself about America and about how the larger society operates and functions, then you became isolated. So I found that tremendously liberating just to learn, because in the process, I polished my English skills, my leadership skills, my ability to speak up and ask questions, and saw how other people conduct board meetings, for example, right? Make difficult decisions. So that to me was a personal growth opportunity. But once you got involved, you also realized you couldn't look away because you saw problems that you could help solve. You saw the values of your voice at the table, asking those questions that no one else would have thought of asking just because you didn't grow up the way you did, right? And also because of my visibility in the Asian American community, I started being asked by other politicians and candidates to help them because they thought I could open doors for them, you know, and introduce them to other Asian Americans. And because of that process, I started encouraging our communities to get involved in voter registration drives. So I worked with different Chinese communities and say, hey, you know, in order to learn who you should vote for, you should first get registered. and you should register as Democrats or Republicans so you can get involved in close the primary election in Maryland. So I started writing columns about, educating our community about political involvement, why they should vote locally and give locally and serve locally, right? And I just enjoyed that process a lot. And then over time, people saw me as a community leader, as an important voice, and they started encouraging me to run, right? And I kept dismissing that idea. If I had to confess one regret, which was I should have done this 10 years sooner when I was younger. It was like, why wait, right? I could have made bigger contributions to society and to our communities and brought a lot more people along. But you had fear because you had no role models. But as I said, through engagement, through helping other people, you learn the rope, and eventually when an opportunity came, it became a little easier. I wouldn't say it's easy to run for anything, but you saw other people did it. Although, being the first is always the hardest because I didn't have a role model from, China running in a district that's majority non-Chinese or non-Asian. So that was still tremendously difficult, but that's a conversation I'll save for the next question or something.
对于我来说，我觉得有2点吧。第一个就是觉得不平则鸣，对不对？我觉得很多时候我们对社会其实很有想法的，很有意见的，或者觉得不公平、不正当的，或者跟我不一样的意志，我们有意见，但是我们很少表达出来。这样呢，我们就没有一个平台。我想就是说，通过 run office， 首先就是知道我们是对这个社区是关心的。We want to get involved. We want to get our voice heard, right? If we win election, we can have a bigger platform， 是吧？这是第一点。第二点，我觉得就是说，我想给大家就是通过我自己的努力，给我们开创一个更大的一个舞台。我觉得我们第一代人呢，以及第2代人呢，甚至第3代人，为什么亚裔的这个 elected policy maker 非常少 ，board member 非常少，或者 executive 相对来说比较少，按比例来说，因为我们很少在这个方面发出自己的声音，大家觉得亚裔没有领导力，或者是怎么样的，是吧？所以呢，这样会影响我们将来的一代。我当时 run school board 就是因为我们大家说很关心教育啊，很关心这个，但是我们在 school board 上就没有一个人，对不对？大家不愿意出来选，或者不愿意付出努力，我们就一直教育社区要做 volunteer， 要参加 PTA， 这当然最好是 run school board 是吧？所以我就从 school board run 起，我说我们看 school board 上我们能做啥，对不对？我觉得印象很深的是，在我当 school board 的时候，2019年我们划学区。那当时就是说，因为我们亚裔住在社区嘛，大家非常关心学区。我觉得如果不是因为我在 school board 上，我们整个亚裔社区受到的影响会非常之大，负面影响。就是说大家通过看到，就是说有人 on the table 是吧 ，at the table 是吧？这个有时候英语没那么好是吧？就是 at the table， 就是你看这个 policy maker has huge influence on the decision，both the process and the outcome， 是不是？我就是希望通过另外一个就是非常喜欢，就是说培养新一代就下一代人，这一点也是我很想做的。就是说通过给孩子实习的机会，让他参与各种 project， 以及 get involved with state legislation， 是吧？这样他们也可以看到相关的影响，或者说觉得这个过程并没那么难。我希望就是将来我培养的那么多 intern， 有10%或者5%的将来能 run for public office。我就觉得非常感恩或者非常高兴的。我希望我们下一代会比我们做得更好，在政策上更有影响力，在这个 national policy 更有 vision， 是吧？这我们不能只是做一只沉默的、辛苦工作的华一代或者华2代，是吧 ？We can have a bigger impact and have a bigger influence.
Well, thanks again. I think that what our audience wanted to know, I'm sure many are thinking like me, is when you become state legislators and you have some experience working that, I know that in the case of Guangya and Wu Chao, you two just got in there, not a lot of the experience dealing with very complicated politics and the processes, but you also served before in city council and school board. The question I have is this: you have mentioned the leadership. You have mentioned there is a well-known saying now, which is we must be at a table. If you're not at a table, you'll be on the menu. But my question is even more than that, more than just to be at a table. In fact, I would say in California, at least, Chinese Americans and Asian Americans are already at a table. There may be some areas we can do some improvement, but in general, I think we're doing pretty well in California. Now, but the problem is once you are at a table, what can you offer uniquely on the table and at that table? And that is something I think not everybody is thinking very hard on. So in other words, what is the unique value and perspective to American politics, American lawmaking process, you think as Chinese Americans that you can bring?
我进了Cary 市议会。其实 Cary 是一个什么城市呢？就是它是在北卡是第7大人口城市，相当于一个比较大的城市，亚裔人口比较多，22%是亚裔人口。那华裔在 Cary 可能也是大概可能是在北卡人数是最多的。但是我开会的时候，基本上就是我是唯一的一个就是person of color。对吧？就是说，那是唯一的一个亚裔，就是这些市政府的这些官员，就是官员和这些工作人员呢，他们也并不是说不考虑亚裔的这个，就因为他们确实就是没有，就是他们不了解这个社区，那也对这个不知道怎么跟亚裔社区去接触。那么我进去之后呢，我可以说，那我就是在亚裔其实有一些很多。需要 language access， 那我们的有一个311 911， 我是 service， 我就一直在 push 这个，就是 provide like Chinese and other languages， 然后有 bilingual 的这些工作人员，要鼓励更多雇佣这样的人来就是 Cary 市政府工作。那么如果你没有这个背景的话，这个工作人员还有这个市政府这些官员，他们是不知道会把这囊括进来的，不是因为他们不想做，是因为他们确实不知道怎么来帮助你。所以就是说，我就觉得是起一个桥梁性的作用，让他们知道我们的社区需要什么，然后让他们知道怎么去服务，怎么去接触这几个社区。那么到了州议会之后呢，如果就是像在州议会，我和 Maria 我们两个是唯一的2个亚裔的，就是议员，我们一进去就推了很多就是关于亚裔的，就是说要求在学校里学习亚裔历史，然后我们就是需要让州政府成立一个 AAPI 的一个 commission， 然后 study what's needed for to better serve the Asian community。 如果就是你没有这个亚裔的议员，他就考虑不到这个人群。所以我们进去之后，我们就是这个一个代表，就不仅我们来解决，就是当然我们选区里面一些经济问题啊，然后我们那些不平等的问题啊，教育还有包括健康，这些都是和其他的议员都完全一样的，就是他们关注什么，我们也关注什么。但是我们不一样的一个比较 unique 的一个 perspective， 就是我们知道这个亚裔社区需要什么，所以我们会推就是跟亚裔来和就华裔息息相关的这些法案。我觉得这是我们能够就是来 contribute 的一部分，很重要的一部分。
Well, I feel strongly that what makes us different is what makes us valuable, which is why representation matters. You know, democracy is a representative body. It just like Guangya said, if you're not represented, and sometimes even well-meaning politicians, elected officials don't know enough about you to speak for you or to serve your best interests, right? So for example, as a state legislator who grew up during the political turmoil in China, and then in my lifetime, I mean, people my generation on this call can echo the sentiment. We witnessed 2 Chinas, right? The before and after of its economic reform, which is why I have a deep appreciation for market economy. and that makes me a surprising champion for economic competitiveness, you know. So in the state of Maryland, in Maryland legislature, my colleagues know that I'm a very strong champion of making Maryland more competitive or growing the economy, not just because I happen to have an economic development background and I was involved in Washington, D.C.'s revitalization movement 20 years ago, but more importantly, I grew up seeing what the society looked like without a private sector, which was why I have deep appreciation for not just market economy, but private sector and the competition and for different industries. So a lot of my legislative work is focusing on growing the industries of the future for the state of Maryland, whether it's advanced manufacturing, biotech, which we are very strong of, and clean energy, which is a whole new horizon, right, that we should capture. And I, didn't set out to do that, but that is my passion. I saw a need, I jumped in, and I became a strong voice. So I was quite surprised that after 5 years of serving as a legislator, I have been named 3 times as Legislator of the Year by different industry groups. And I was like, me? Seriously? I barely warmed my bench, but people see the value you bring because you have that global perspectives, right? So don't underestimate the unique value that you bring for who you are, okay? So the other thing is, now that we are part of the larger Asian community, and yes, as a minority, you always represent 2 communities, the geographic community that elected you and the larger cultural community that see you as their voice and their role model, right? So just like Guangya and the delegate Chao, I focus a lot on making sure Asian American voices are reflected in everything we do. So for example, I had such a difficult time during my first election in convincing people to vote in the primary election. So I decided we need to change and reform our election system to make it more friendly to immigrants who don't like political parties. A lot of us immigrants don't really care much about political parties. We just want a strong community and a strong economy, right? But in Maryland, if you don't join any political parties as a voter, your vote doesn't count as much. So I decided I'm going to introduce legislation to crack open the door wider, to be more friendly to people who don't want to join political parties as voters, right? Even though the bill didn't pass, but my message got across, and I will continue to push for election reform. The other is multilingual voter registration forms. Now we have Korean, Chinese, and Taiwanese languages, among other top 5 languages in the state of Maryland, because of my work directly with the State Board of Elections, right? Because democracy and participation is important, and we want to lower the barrier for different people. And I also introduced the legislation to make sure that Asian Americans' data are adequately and equitably collected and reported, just like any other racial categories in our public schools. So there are a lot of things we do because we know who we are and whose voices are being underrepresented, including, expanding the curriculum of making sure Asian American studies are included in American studies. So there are a lot of things we do that we don't necessarily think, oh, because I'm Asian, I'm doing it. It's because you bring who you are to the policy-making table.
谢谢刘耀和丽丽。我觉得第一点我也是赞成，就是说 representation matters， 是吧？这一点其实很重要的。大家如果在公司 promotion 的时候，或者在一个其他时候，你需要有人 promote， 对不对？如果有人认同你，觉得你做的工作不错，你才有可能被 nominate。所以就是说，在这个时候，你就需要让人看得见你。我觉得当你选上之后，至少就是说你这个社区也会被看到，对不对？不管你代表什么样的声音，代表什么样的力量。但是至少 people see you, they see a very diverse community, right? If nobody on the table, they will not see you, right? 我记得我举个例子来说，就是我记得有次我们谈货的时候，大家有人就问说 how do you feel about American ban on TikTok， 是吧？就是接着其中的有个议员就说 let's we hear from Dr. Chao, Delegate Wu, right? 他觉得说，因为我对这个事情比较关心，比较了解，我就想。这就是我们的一个 opportunity perspective， 对不对？我就说，我记得10年前中国办 Facebook 是吧？没想到10年后美国办 TikTok，what a twisted world 是吧？我就是这么说，是吧？非常明白直了的说，这个 world 真的很不一样，是吧？这个世界很不一样，大家一听都明白我什么意思，对不对？我就想，就是这种 different perspective 或者 diversity of opinion 非常重要。尤其对我们来说，我觉得，因为我们是经历过，就像我说，我经历过资本主义社会、社会主义社会混合的资本主义、社会主义社会，是吧？接着还经历过各种不同的教育，我比很多人更了解这个社会的多样性，因为我经历的很不一样，我对所有的社会都充满热爱，因为我处在当中，都得到不同的帮助，都取得各种各样的成功，就是很希望别人也看到这个社会有一个多样性，有一个 tolerance for different opinion， at the same time accept different， right？ 因为我们就是minority 当中的 minority， 如果我们自己接受自己，同时也希望别人能接受我们自己，我们的这个在这社会的生存就更有希望，对不对？这是一点。还有一点就是说，作为我自己非常 pragmatic， 我经常举例子来说，我在 school board 上4年，我见了3个 school board member 哭过，对不对？一点是 public meeting 哭了，对不对？或者这个 close meeting 哭了。我就是说，对我来说，我从来不非常 ideologically 说 that's the only solution, right? I'm very pragmatic, try to find the common ground, is a bridge builder， 是吧？所以很多时候，我跟其他的 board member 讨论，我经常说 how can I help you， 是吧？ What can we reach a solution to really address the issue, right？ 所以就是说，当人家看到你真的是为了这个共同的利益来 find 一个 common ground， 大家会 trust 你，对不对？接着相信你 offer 的这个 solution， 这点非常重要。因为如果我们仅仅只说 no， 这个其实最容易做的、最简单做的 ，will not achieve anything， 是吧？ You want to be a bridge builder, consensus builder, and then when you need other people's help, they come to help you, right？ 但是我个人来说，我觉得这几年来看，我觉得 xenophobia 是个最大的威胁，尤其对我们华人、对亚裔，对不对？很多人把我们不当成美国人，是吧？把我们的后代看成外国人，或者有一种恐惧，觉得我们就不是美国人，对不对？或者我们的后代不是美国人，这对他们的一个身份是一个非常大的挑战，对我们自己的成功也是个挑战，对不对？或者说，难道这个世界不够大，我们不能拥抱这个整个世界的和平吗？这一点我是经常说的，我以前很少说，我现在说，如果我不说，那又有谁说呢？对不对？第3点就是 AAPI 本身，有时候我们很可能想说我们融入美国社会，对不对？就像 integration 是吧？就是忘掉自己，说我为了美国共同的利好，忘掉自己这个身份，是吧？但是在这个多种族的社会，其实这样的是不可能的，对不对？你觉得你说你代表美国利益，什么叫美国利益，是吧？每个人的利益就是美国利益，对不对？每个人为争取自己的利益，为这奋斗，接着大家的努力就造成了美国整个的利益，对不对？别人看到你，首先觉得你是亚裔，如果你还有 accent， 觉得让你肯定是 immigrant 或者 foreigner， 是不是？所以这点我们不需要忘记，就是 we are trying our best to promote we are AAPI, we are part of the bigger community, right？ 我们可以 contribute 或者 make a good contribution and make a good policy, and then we can all have American dreams, just maybe a little different.
Wow, very eloquently said, Wu Chao. I'm touched. Now, you have just mentioned about TikTok, about China. Actually, you are indirectly talking about U.S., China, and China. I want to ask 3 of you a question I think I'm sure is on the mind of every audience here today. How do you deal with this China issue? How you are running into that every day, and you look like a Chinese. You are Chinese. Not only you're Chinese, you are the first generation directly from China. You still have families in China, friends in China. A lot of your past is in China. And in this day and age, how did you deal with that tough issue? Please.
从我的情况来讲，我觉得我的就是作为移民的这个背景，我不觉得是个 barrier， 因为我所在的地方就是 Cary 还有 Wake County 是比较包容的地方。这里面就比如以 Cary 为例，可能20%的人都是移民，那移民的孩子、移民的就是 family 就是 friend 就更多了。所以对于我来说，我没有觉得是 barrier，就是说而且就像我们就是所处理的，就是不管是市政府里的问题，还是州里面的问题，其实接触不到，就是什么中美关系什么的，就是我也鼓励就是在听的这些朋友们，就是你不要觉得自己是移民就觉得你不够 qualified， 其实我觉得很多的华人都是 over qualified， 很多的亚裔的 candidates 都是 way over qualified， 很多的女性的 candidates 也都是highly qualified， 就是你不要觉得就是自己的英文也许不是 perfect， 或者说自己的演讲能力不是 perfect 都没有关系，就是很多时候只要你有一颗愿意为社区服务的心，想着怎么改进就是社区的这些政策，怎样让社区变得更好，我觉得就可以站出来服务，所以我不想过多的谈论就是什么中美关系，因为反正我所担心的就是在这种中美关系下，就是对我们在美国所生活的这些华人有什么样的影响。当然，就是中美关系紧张的时候，对我们华人就是华人的日子就不好过。现在也很多一些法案，就是在佛罗里达，包括在 Texas，South Carolina 就是推的一些法案，阿拉巴马对吧？全国都推的这些法案，对我们华人就是那个生存环境就是越来越窄。我有很大的 concern 我也很希望听听其他2位议员的一些看法。
You. Well, I think what China chooses to do is beyond our control, right? But since we chose to be Americans, it is our responsibility to influence American politics and policies, because this is our country and this is our home now, you know? And running for office is surely a very important and strong way to influence policies more directly, right? So that we can facilitate peaceful, constructive conversations and dialogues and relationships. Of course, we all want these two countries to get along for many reasons, and it's mutually beneficial. But for me, I have always focused on local community affairs, and I kind of professionally grew up from local government and public policy. So I have always focused on the state and local issues. And to me, my priority is to make sure whatever happens on the global stage does not negatively affect our communities, whether it's Chinese communities or Asian American communities that look Chinese. Just, like the pandemic, it affected a lot more people than just the Chinese Americans, right? And just like when Pearl Harbor happened, Chinese Americans got affected, not just the Japanese Americans, so we are all in this pot together. And which is all the more important why, for example, during Black Lives Matter movement, I helped to facilitate the Chinese American community's response as community leaders to pull together our different groups to send a strong message of support, of empathy. Because after we have just been through what we have been through, we couldn't be on the sideline and act like other people's pain is not our business, and we cannot get into the habit of pointing fingers at victims. That is dangerous, because if a system is not safe for one person, it's not safe for anybody. And we should know that as a very super small minority, right? And maybe in China, you can afford not to get involved in politics. But in America, it is dangerous to not pay attention and get involved in politics, because our livelihood literally depends on our involvement.
我觉得这个问题非常好，是吧？因为我印象最深的是，当时我参加8020的时候，就不知道有多少人听说过8020，吴贤彪老先生是吧？说 we should never get involved with the American foreign policy， 是吧？就是不要跟美国外交涉及关系。我说这是不可能的，是吧？不可能独善其身，对不对？这是我举个例子来说，第一个就是我让 state delegate 的时候，一个印象最深的，我啊，还有其他几个亚裔那个候选人的那个 campaign sign， 对不对？就被有人上面写个 communism， 所以你会被，虽然我们 county 被大家称为非常 diverse 的 county， 对不对？就是白人是占少数的，对不对？我们亚裔占了20%，黑人占20%，接着白人占40%左右，接着 Latino 占10%左右，对不对？但是这有 racism 是吧？有 racism 隐藏在这社区，你是避免不了的。那我怎么看待呢？我就是说 ，I have to focus on positive side 是吧？忽略这些人，对不对？ 其实这些人只是很小一部分，你真的不可能赢过他们，对吧？没有必要去跟他们 argue 这个非常 negative 的，或者说给他们这个平台来怎么样。对于我来说，我在 social media 说抢的这个事情 ，OK，let's go there get over with it， 是吧？但是我要把这个事情表达出来，我还联系了警局啊，对不对？我说这个事情很危险，希望你注意这个事情要调查，对不对？但是 beyond that， 是吧？我觉得我非常就是说 confident， 我很自信，我们可以取得更大的成绩，并不因为这些种族主义者会怎么样，是吧？他觉得你是长得像华人，或者出生在中国，或者是华人几代就觉得你是 communist， 是吧？这东西我觉得我们应该有这个信心 overcome 这种 stereotype 或者 racism， 这是第一个。第二个，觉得说我们应该以美国人的身份来看待中美关系，讨论促进一个中美和平友好发展的关系。因为其实即使在美国整个社会，也不是所有人都说中美应该打一仗啊，是吧？其实还有很多人是支持中美和平发展，对不对？我记得我以前就说过，太平洋足够大，对不对？中美之间是可以发展和平友好的关系。但是现在的问题就是说，中国有中国的问题，对不对？但是我们现在是以美国人的身份来促进中美和平友好发展，对两个国家都有好处。我觉得这一点我们应该有信心，敢于说出这个事情。如果我们自己都不敢说中美和平友好是好的，那你何况怎么能取得那些一天到晚想打仗的，是吧？那还有种族主义的那些人的这个支持呢，是吧？或者改变他们的看法，还有怎么敢赢得那些本来就有点支持，但是不敢大声说出中美应该和平发展的那些人的支持呢，对不对？我们应该有这个勇气。我觉得说，第三个就是说，我觉得我们要敢于这个 provide that perspective narrative， 是吧？就是说，中国美国的确不一样，是吧 ？Culturally, politically, historically, everything is different， 是吧 ？Everything is different。但是对于美国这个支持 diversity 的社会，我们应该说，我们敢于相信或者 support 支持其他社会、种族各种不同的生存方式，对不对？这一点我觉得我们敢于说出来，不是说我美国说该怎么样，其实美国内部也没有统一的观点，但是经常是那种大声的说着比较鹰派的声音在报纸头条上，对不对？我觉得我是一直想说，我们要支持中美友好，对不对？所以我在2018年也帮助我们这个城市成立了个跟中国一个江苏省溧阳市成立了第一个友好城市，江苏溧阳跟我们哥伦比亚市成立了友好城市。我希望就是通过就是普通居民的交流，是吧？人与人的交流，可以让大家更了解这种 diversity， 是吧？不同的 experience，but at the same time, we can create a better world together between U.S. and China.
Okay, I'm eager to jump to my next question. As many people has noticed, all three of you are not just state legislators. You are all Democrats. Tell us two questions. First, why you are a Democrat, and two, how do you deal with in your work, in your life, the partisanship or bipartisanship? Thanks. Two part of the questions.
It's a very good question, right? Why are we Democrats? 我觉得如果我不是竞选，公职的话，我可能会 could have stayed as an affiliate, right? 对吧？就是说，我们移民就是不仅仅是华裔了，但是作为移民这个群体，大部分在的地方其实是比较蓝的地方。那么基本上就在我们所在的选区，那么你想就是能够当选的话，那基本上就是只有可能是作为民主党才会当选，是这样的。那我相信就是除了就是我们这3位议员，那么在座的很多人也都是在比较蓝的地方。那么你想出来，那你就想，那要么你就别选了，要么你选的话，因为你其实不管是作为民主党也好，作为共和党也好，是两个党都会有 moderate 的，就是说其实我认为就是 moderate Republican 和 moderate Democrats，他们那个分界线并没有那么明显，在很多可能很多的那个议题上面，你有可能会比较 leaning Republican， 很多议题上你可能比较 lean Democrats 都有可能的，就是我也不认为就是说就是 being a Democrat or being a Republican it defines who you are 和 defines what kind of legislators or policymakers you are, right? 因为我们现在在北卡这个议会里面，民主党是 super minority， 对吧？那么我的那些我 sponsor 的 bill， 我都会有 Republican co-sponsor。我有一个 HOA 的 bill， 就是 House 和 Senate 都 unanimously pass， 就是说因为我都有就是共和党的议员来支持，所以我不认为就是说。不管你的政治观点怎么样，不要阻碍你就是出来进行公共服务。但是我非常就是 honestly speaking， 我觉得就是说，那么在民主党是对 minority member，including Asian Americans 是比较包容的，那么也有更多的机会，因为他这个党里面就是要给少数裔提供更多的这个机会，所以那政治上面也是这样的，你会发现。在民主党里头有更多的亚裔的民选官员啊，共和党那边非常非常的少，这也是我们所面临的现实的情况，所以我就是我在就是这个就是从政的这个过程当中呢，其实是一个很 struggle 的过程中，就是因为我觉得我受到的 attack。就是对我伤害最大的是来自我自己的社区，来自华裔社区，就是对，
我们都会意的笑了一下 ，yes。
对，就是说，可能老美还就是还没有，就是像华裔，就是那些就是他们可能，我觉得更多的时候。就是他们可能不太了解，就是其实你就是从政什么，这只是一个 public service. It doesn't really 就是 define who you are, right? You know, you are in a party that's you are because you are Democrat, right? It's just look at what this person does, right? And look at this person's record. Right, it just我就是 encourage our community to be open-minded and support our candidates who are willing to listen to our community, serve our community, just be open-minded and right, you are Republican and you can still support a Democratic candidate because you think this elected official or this candidate truly cares about our community and wants to be a voice and wants to serve.
Okay,
it's a good question.
Thanks.
Yeah, good question and a good answer too. I think personally, I don't know of many immigrants who are diehard Democrats or diehard Republicans. I think most immigrants are, party agnostic. We just want a strong community, and the parties are simply instrumentalities to help you get to, get to the table and exercise your ability to influence. But personally, I have a little bit of a different journey because I used to work in multicultural affairs. In higher education and American University. And I learned what it meant because in China, I was not a minority, right? And in China, I was not Asian either. I was just Chinese, and coming to America, I had to learn what it meant to be Asian and what it meant to be a minority. So I learned what it meant to be minority by learning about Black American history and culture. So I was responsible for American University's multicultural affairs programming. So I organized a lot of speakers programs and invited some civil rights leaders to speak. And I started writing now we call those op-ed pieces for campus newspapers and advise the student groups. So I learned my rope by integrating myself in a very different way from most Chinese immigrants, right, professionally. So I had different perspectives from working with minority students and working with those civil rights leaders. And when I got involved with OCA and went to OCA National Convention, I think it was I'm really dating myself. I think it was 1998, okay, when OCA held its national convention in Washington, D.C. And I heard Vice President Al Gore speak. speak to the conference. And then I heard that the first Chinese American governor ever from mainland United States, Gary Locke. At the time, he was governor, newly elected from the state of Washington. After the two of them spoke, which were both electrifying and very inspiring, I was like, yeah, now I know I'm a Democrat, because it made so much sense to me. Everything they said about Asian American empowerment and all of that made so much sense to me. And it was just really like opening new doors and opening my eyes, you know, and pushed me to think about these bigger issues about Asian American position, Chinese Americans' position and future, which is focuses more on our Americanness, not the Asianness necessarily, right? And so I went through a journey of, you know, learning about different communities and different subcultures and reflecting and writing and speaking on those issues. And so to me, it was not a surprise that I would run as a Democrat, because I am a Democrat. You know, I have been a Democrat for over 2 decades. As soon as I could vote, I voted for Al Gore the following year, you know, as a new American. But I understand parties are hard for a lot of immigrants, and not just Chinese immigrants, because a lot of us left a system that did not work for us, and we just did not like politics, period, and especially parties, you know. So it's a very good question. And sometimes I appreciate my Republican colleagues' arguments about growing the economy, about being business friendly and all of that. And sometimes I wish my Democratic colleagues would be more business friendly. And when I ran, I actually ran into a problem with some local Democrats questioning whether I'm a real Democrat because I'm so business friendly. I said, are you kidding me, right? Who's going to say I am not a Democrat? It's not for you to judge, because I value inclusiveness and diversity. And I believe the Democratic Party is what is fighting for minority interests. And that to me is much more important than what's happening to my pocketbooks. And so that's why I'm a Democrat. You know.
海培，我觉得这个问题好，谢谢刘耀还有丽丽的分享。我觉得为什么 Democrat， 我觉得就是一个 acceptance， 对不对？ I feel more accepted in the Democratic Party, right? So 就非常直接，是吧？你要被社会承认，你要社会承认你，对不对？我简单的一个数据就让大家了解，在马里兰州立法会是吧？我们其实共和党议员也挺多的，但所有的共和党议员都是白人，对不对？民主党的就非常大数，就像我跟莉莉奇是吧？还有其他的各种种族的都有，就是说明一个例子。实际上相对来说 ，Democrats is more welcome， 就是这么说，对不对？这只是一个我当然我注册选民的时候，我首先也是无党派的，对不对？但是大家也知道，其实如果在座的各位都知道，就美国的初选，对不对？初选非常重要，为什么？因为初选是很多州都是叫 close primary， 对不对？ Close primary independent 是基本没有什么话语权的，对不对？所以说，如果你想 make an impact, especially in a lot of election, right? Primary is the most important one， 对不对？所以你就非得选一个党派，选一个党派既有你自己觉得哪个党派更舒服，还有哪个党派你可以 make a bigger impact， 是吧？所以这个就是个人选择，你不管选择什么党派，其实都没有关系的，但是你一定要选个党派。当无党派当然觉得很自由了，因为没有党派。其实无党派也是有党派的，你无党派就是个党派嘛，对不对？很多人不理解，或者说觉得，哎呀，我无党派显得更高尚一点。其实真的没有，所有的党派都是平等的，对不对？但是你要 make a difference， 你要加入个党派。就是另外一点就是说 ，how to deal， 你怎么 deal with the partisanship？ 我觉得这个问题比较有意思，因为我在 school board 上当了4年，在 school board 上其实没有那么 partisan， 因为我们7个 board member 大家都相互平等的，接着你拿4票就可以决定一件事情，对不对？所以你很多事情你要 really work with others， 是吧？没有说谁是哪个党派，谁是哪个党派，而是非常比较，我觉得说事情针对事情，对不对 ？Find a solution。但是在 state legislature， 我觉得比较 partisan， 我可以这样说。当然，丽丽肯定更有经验，对不对？因为我印象更深的是，我们在一个小组内讨论，是吧？我觉得那个东西，我不喜欢，是吧？有个 bill 我不喜欢，我就投了一票反对票。我立即收到 leadership 跟我谈话，说你们投反对票。我说依据我的经验，还有我们 school board 给我的反馈，我需要投反对票。我觉得这个 doesn't make sense。当然，虽说我的一票反对，并不会改变最终的结果， 但是我觉得说，从我的经验，从我的这些这个背景来说，我需要投反对票，对不对？我知道这反对票投的会让大家对我有意见，但是我觉得 we should allow this diversity, right? Diversity of opinion, even among ourselves, among Democrats, 是吧？就是说 partisan unfortunately is a reality, 是吧？ At the same time, we can still try to find the solution or the vote we agree with ourselves. Inner peace, right? Find our inner peace. Vote the way we want.
All right. This brings to my last question to you all. My last question is this. What can you say to the audience here today? By the way, we have a very large audience today. I'm very, very impressed. It looks like how this tells you how important this issue are to many of us. What is your heartfelt kind of words or advice or a gem of wisdom that you want to pass on to our audience here today, and maybe even to the younger generation? But I think it just in general will be fine.
就是你最开始的时候，海培你提到了，就是为什么我们华裔就是参政的比较少，因为我觉得我们就是从小到大成长起来，就是没有受过这个民主的训练，我们思维里头就是没有这种就是参与社区、服务社区，然后参政，然后议政这个观念，然后觉得呢，政治就是给我们很多人的这个就是一种像Lily 是经过了就是文革，就是这个有一些经历，对吧？就是虽然我和吴超可能比较年轻，就是没有亲身经历过这个文革，就是对政治就是有一种本能的就是反感，但是因为我们是就是在里头，然后看到了这个就制定法案的这个过程，我们能够意识到，就是说这里面的作用有多大？就是说一条法案能够影响到多少人的生命，就是说影响到多少人的生活，就是一条法案能够改善多少人的就是生存环境，就是我们切身就是看到了，就是这个 policy making 它和就这个就是对这个社区影响有多大，就是负面的和正面的都有非常大的影响。就是你也知道，就是在你的这些几十年的经历中，就是你也是反对过很多法案。这些每一个法案你反对的时候过程中或支持的这个过程中，你都是需要这些议员的支持。那么你找的这些议员呢，他们也会有 friends， 就是他也有一个 network， 就说你这些就是我们有自己的人进去之后，不仅是这些人要帮我们做事，要帮我们发声，那么这些人呢，其实就是相当于我们这个社区的一个代表，他会在这个他所在的社区，不管是 school board 也好，不管是 town 还有 county commission 也好，不管是在 legislature 也好，不管是在 Congress 也好，他会有自己的这个 network， 他会去 educate 他周围的同事 colleagues， 他所在的 caucus， 如果他是个民主党，他会 educate the Democratic caucus。如果你支持的这个人他是 an influential member of the caucus， 那么他对这个 caucus 的这个政策的制定有很大的影响。那么你对这个州里面有很大的影响，那么其实就是说，那越来越多的州来效仿，那个对全国有很大的影响。所以就是说，你能够选出就是代表我们自己利益的人，让这些人来出来服务，就非常难得。那么就是希望大家就是能够，就是有些可能就像你，还有很多 UCA 的这些 board members， 还有 UCA 的 volunteer， 他就接触过这些 politicians， 接触过这些人，但是呢，我们接触的人毕竟有限，所以就是在座的每一个人。其实你都是一个 influencer， 就是 influencer 就是网红，对吧？那如果你能影响到一个人，或者你能影响到2个人的票，或者你能够不管他怎么投票，你能够让这些人去投票，你就是个 influencer， 你就是个 leader。那么你要发挥自己的作用，就是你把你看到的，就是这些人他有什么作用，和参政议政的好处，你告诉这些人。我觉得这就是我希望 就是能够表达给大家的信息，也希望大家能够做的这些事情，就是每个人都可以是个 leader， 每个人都可以是 influencer。
So I think there are several things I want to mention. First of all, I think people who grew up like many of us did in China, which is a very different culture and also a very different system, right? We tend to have this top-down mindset that we're waiting for some signal from the above to be told what to do. But democracy really favors those who participate. There's not going to be higher order to ensure equity and inclusion just because the Chinese community has grown tripled our population size, right? There's no one there to ensure that we're going to have a seat on the school board just because our kids, make up half of the school population, for example, right? Because it's not by appointment, it's by election. You have to self-select to participate and take the risk of putting your name out there and make all the sacrifices to make the case to voters one by one, sometimes knocking on doors one by one, sending the mailers piece by piece to explain why you, of all people, can speak for them and can best represent them. And that's the messiness and difficulty of democracy, especially if you're not running for federal level offices. It's the personal touch and the personal case making that is so hard, and this stops a lot of people who don't speak English as their first language, who didn't grow up in this country cold, right? And they would just cannot imagine how this could work out. But we need you more than ever. And of course, you don't have to all run for office to be involved in politics and political influence, because most people don't choose to run office and they exercise enormous influence on policies and politics. One, why not encourage your children to consider a career in public policy, right? So whether they run for office or not is their choice, but they can choose to be policy influencers, to be political operatives, to run people's campaigns or to draft those bills, right? And that is enormous influence. It's a bench we don't have in the Chinese community, whether it's on the political side or policy making side. I wish I had more people to hire to work for me who speak 2 languages and who understand 2 cultures. So that's the kind of bench we need to facilitate. And also, I hope our Chinese community can get out of this mindset, right, of we run for office because we want to become something. This is not a career path when we advise our children, for example, right? This is not a typical career path. In other words, you can be a scientist and doctor or anything and run for office because it's democracy. It's by participation and self-choice, right? You don't have to have this experience and that experience. Anybody can run for anything other than president of the United States if you were not born in this country, basically. Okay, so and also I think it's more meaningful to measure our success by impact than by being something, than by the title or position we have achieved, right? Because that's the only thing that lasts beyond your time, that's actually impactful and meaningful, So at the end of the day, I didn't choose politics because I wanted to become a state legislator. In fact, I spent a lot of time thinking I was going to run for county council. Because I knew Montgomery County so well, and I was in the county government serving county executive as a political appointee. I was really focusing on running that race until the seat opened, because the current Lieutenant Governor, Reuben Miller, at the time decided to run for Congress, and that seat became open in my district. And people were like, that's your seat, it's in your district, and there's no Asian, right? So I'm like, okay, so it's preparation meets opportunity. And so my word of advice is see yourself as American. If you don't want to be treated as perpetual foreigner, then stop treating yourself as a perpetual foreigner. I have heard so many people from Chinese community who keep referring to white people as Americans, and they only refer to white people as Americans. They never refer to Black people, Latinos, Asians as Americans. Stop it. If you want to be respected, respect yourself. Right? I call white people, you know what I call white people? I call them white people. Yes. Okay. So that's how I respect myself as an American, because if we're going to identify people by race, then let's all do that. Instead of saying so-and-so is an American, as if you are less than American. because words matter. How we speak to ourselves matter. How we speak to our children matter. Okay, so I'm going to leave you with that. Thank you.
丽丽，你讲的非常好。我想就是重复你刚才说的 ，democracy favors participant， right？ 这个非常重要。就是说，有人说，就是 community， 就是社会活动，as long as you show up, you succeed like 85% or something, right? I forget the exact number。就是说，只要你 show up， 是吧？你就成功了80%还是85%，对不对？就是说，你像我觉得我想讲3点。第一个就是说，我们需要参与社区。做志愿者，或者就是说参加会议，对不对？你参加你孩子的 PTA， 或者参加从小的时候参加孩子的 PTA， 从大的时候参加 county 的郡的，或者各种 volunteer 啊，或者 commission 啊，或者 advisory board 啊，对不对？我们需要参与这个。我经常很遗憾的看到，是吧？我们这个 county 其实亚裔啊或者华人非常多了。我去参加各种 town hall 啊，参加各种 meeting 啊，我自己都是唯一的亚裔，你说觉得多遗憾，对不对？接着说，因为其实这是个双向的选择，对不对？你听到社区的声音，你可以反馈给别人，或者这些我的同事们 ，our colleagues, our delegates, right, hear from the community, they need to think about it as well。就是如果只是我自己说出来，他们可能还不一定相信。如果他们从社区听到很多华人的亚裔反映的声音，对不对？他们觉得，哎呦，这个问题真重要，对不对？我们需要 show up， 不管是就是说作为 volunteer 啊，还是 lead 呀，是吧？不管是 political events 还是 non-political events， 只有 by volunteer， 你将来才有可能 lead， 是吧？只有 participate， 你才可以 get involved， 才 be part of a bigger community， 是吧？这是一点我觉得非常重要。如果我们自己不 involve， 自己不参与，怎么期待着我们的孩子们或者将来的社会会有更大的影响呢？对不对 ？Lead by example， 这个非常重要。我觉得我出来 run for school board 的时候，我也是想 lead by example。We always somebody else step up, right? That will not happen, unfortunately, right? 第二点，我其实很想说的就是说，要 compromise。当然，这个词听起来大家很不喜欢，是吧？你要 compromise， 接着说，哎呦，我是共和党，我就要怎么样？我是民主党就怎么样？我是无党派，我2个派我都特别恨他们，对不对？就是他们把这个国家搞糟了，是吧？这个其实呢。You can always find a good side from other people, 是吧？ You can always find a bad side from other people. But there's a reason people doing something like that, 是吧？人家做任何事情都是有原因的，对不对？我们觉得有时候要把我们的脚放在人家的，就是 put your own foot on other shoes, right? Into other shoes. 就是有人想想为什么别人这么想，可能他们的人生经历跟你不一样，可能他们受过的教育跟你不一样，对不对？这一点我觉得非常重要，因为有时候可能就是我们华人社区对我们要求更严。一个方面，他们讲中文，对不对？尤其第一代人，是吧？所以在微信里骂得特别欢，对不对？但是有时候他们想一下，就是说我为什么这样想，是吧？我说你这样想，其实我完全理解，但是还有100个人另外的想法，那怎么办？对不对？没有一个问题就是说就有一个唯一的答案，尤其是政治问题或者社会问题，对不对？不是说1+1等于2。我觉得这一点就是说，在社会政治讨论这一中，不是1+1等于2。我觉得，尤其是对理工科学生来说，这个一定要记住，对不对？这个不是1+1等于2。我们有时候就 fall to the trap， 是吧？总要分出个对错，其实有时候分不出对错的。这一点，我觉得就是说，我们在成长的过程，我们整个社区也在成长，但是这个成长有时是非常 painful 的，对不对？突然意识到为什么会有这一 debate， 是因为有时候我们就想要说服别人，是吧？其实如果说我们的目标是理解别人，接着可能就角度就有点不一样了。因为你想说服别人，就觉得你是正确的，其实别人也有他自己的观点，是吧？这是个民主社会 ，everyone has their own opinion， 对不对？第3点就是说，通过做志愿者，是吧？通过发现 compromise， 我觉得就是一个 platform。我们怎么能建立我们自己的 platform？ 就是我觉得今天晚上这么多人，300多人，很多人都比我优秀，对不对？很多社区成员都比我优秀。I'm not the best candidate. I'm not the best, I would say, qualified person to run office. 但是我们需要有人 run， 对不对？最终我 run 了，而且赢了，对不对？因为我想 create a bigger platform。我觉得我们的问题就是我们没有 platform， 我们亚裔没有 platform， 是吧？在 national level 也没有很多人 认同我们的 platform， 或者没有很多人给我们 platform。就像丽丽刚才说的 ，Nobody will appoint you, right? You need to get that opportunity yourself or ourselves， 对不对？所以我们就要想办法 create a bigger platform for ourselves， 是吧 ？By running for something, volunteer something, lead some project, and eventually be the voice, our voice, right? Your voice, change the world we want.
Wow, very well said. Actually, this hand raising is a little bit too fast. So we will next ask 3 of our guest speakers here today, ask the other 2 a quick question, and then we're going to have about 10 minutes question and answer, and then we're done with today. Thank you.
我想问一下 Lily 和吴超，你们是怎么鼓励其他的人，更多的就是华人，就是出来run for office or get involved in politics? How do you recruit candidates to run?
Are you talking about Chinese or Asian, or are you talking about
Yeah,
any?
Chinese. Yeah.
这一点我有 track record，OK？ 我是2018年 run school board， 对不对？成功竞选之后，接着我连续2届 recruit 2个 school board member，both run and win the election。接着2020年，我们 county 又选了一个第1代华人 run school board， 而且赢得了竞选，是陆云博士。接着2022年，我又 recruit 另外一个陈凌峰博士竞选我们的 school board， 也成功的当选。就是说，我觉得这有几点吧。第一点就是说，你要发现那些有 passion 的人，所以 work with people who have passion， right？ 这是很重要，对吧？我知道他们有 passion， 对社区关心，这是第一点。第二个，当然，大家很担心的一个点就是说，会影响我们的事业，对不对？工作这一点，我觉得很多人担心。所以就是说 ，show your example， we can still be a board member， can have a good job，right？ 是吧？这是第二点。当然了，是吧？你仍然有很难的事情的。第3点就是说，我觉得就是说，怎么 balance 这个 family， 这个很难，有点难，对不对 ？Once you are being public domain, you will be always busy， 是吧？你就是这么多的除了你这个 professional 的这个 politician 的 meeting， 你还很多 community meeting， 对不对？尤其很多人像我记得我当时 run school board 的时候，我孩子老2才3、4岁，对不对？我就老大也就8、9岁。那当时我也很担心，就是怎么 balance。但是有时候，如果我们想的太多了 ，we will never get anything done， 是吧？有时候我记得说，对所有的人来说 ，just do it，right？ You will never know. By running office, you actually open new door for you, not for and then for the community， 是吧 ？Your career will be better too, right? So really 不要担心太多 ，just do it.
Well, to answer your question, Guang Yao, I as I mentioned earlier, before I ran for office myself, I had been helping others with their campaigns many times over, whether they are Asians or not, and also encouraging our own communities to get involved, especially Asians and immigrants. So by the time I ran for a campaign, I reached out to a lot of people I worked with, asking them to endorse me, asking them to donate to my campaign. So I had somewhat of a cultural base from different communities that I could tap into. I'm not saying it's easy. It was not, but I did not start anew, so to speak. And of course, I promised that I would hold the door open once I opened the door, right, myself. And now we have, after I got elected, I continue to encourage other people, especially Asian American and women and minorities in political offices. Now we have Julie Young, and she reached out to me many times asking for advice, from very nitty-gritty administrative questions to knocking on doors, to engagement and reaching out to different communities. And also, you help cultivate a bench. I oftentimes intentionally recruit some Asian American interns, whether they are Chinese or not, because it depends on who applies to my office, right? And when they apply, all things being comparable, I try to deliberately, cultivate some Asian Americans and say, you could be me or better. right? Because we're first generation, you can go much further, you know. And when Chao decided to switch to state legislature, we all went out to knock on doors for him, right? Because now I'm a little less lonely having another Chinese immigrant. And I proudly say in the state of Maryland, we actually doubled our representation from 1 to 2, you know, that's not bad, right? In the matter of just 4 years. So yeah, other people see your example and you can encourage them to be their best version of themselves. Not everyone is cut out to run for office, but I have many dear friends who are Chinese Americans and immigrants, and they sometimes reach out to me asking for career advice and all that about handling some tricky issues. And I'm more than happy to help them because you don't have to be a politician to be impactful and to live the best version of yourself.
Thanks. You guys have a questions for others? The 3 of you.
那我就一个问题跟丽丽或者刘耀，当然有可能这种问题答案都差不多，是吧？就是说，如果有人想 run office， 是吧 ？What's the first step, right? If they really want to make an impact, right? How do you encourage them? And what's the most difficult part for you when you decide to run, right? It's kind of related.
我觉得对 first time candidates 一个很大的 barrier 就是fundraising 就是你决定的时候，尤其是比如像北卡，那么就是我是可能华人里面就是第一个就是来竞选就是州议会层面的，就是我们北卡可能还没有很多的亚裔的组织，没有很多亚裔的 PACs。那我每次去DC 还有加州还有就是 New York 参加活动的时候，我发现这么多的 non-profit 组织，然后这么多就是 active 很多的 advocates 是吧？很多的 AAPI 就是 community leaders, political leaders, elected officials。那在北卡就没有这样的这种土壤，所以那么就是说，候选人想出来选的话，那么就一个 fundraising 是一个很大的问题。那么如果他想出来的话，我觉得就像有就是 UCA 这样一个 national network， 就是一个非常好的一个平台，就是认识就是更多的就是志同道合的，就是支持你的这些就 supporters 是一个对 candidate 来说非常的重要啊。就是也谢谢 UCA 就是这么多年对社区所做的贡献。
So you're talking about general advice about for people who are thinking about getting into politics. Yeah, I think starting with what you care about is the most important thing, right? For example, if you care deeply about local school board issues, because school board is now more important than ever. Some of the biggest cultural wars are being fought about banning books, about LGBTQ issues and bathroom use and parents' rights and all of that, right? School boards are very important decision-making front or even redistricting and all that kind of thing. So if that is what you're passionate about, start with what you think you are passionate about and where your voice would matter the most. It's more important to be effective. And oftentimes in our Chinese community, we think in a very vertical fashion. It's like, oh, the federal government, then state government, then county government and school board. To be honest with you, none of these bodies report to each other in America, right? In America, power is decentralized by design, and that's called the democracy. Branches are separated by design. So that's why you have to pay attention to every election at every level to make sure your rights are protected, because they don't report to each other and they don't, they are not designed just the way, in China, way it is in China, right? So you have ability to influence many different levels of politics. You ask yourself, what do you care the most about and where you think that level of government would be most appropriate for you to run if you want to run for office. And then, of course, you have to, for me, I think one tip I want to share with everyone is you start with your own cultural community, right? So if you're a doctor and scientist or professor or whatever, you start with your professional circle, your own cultural circle, right? Associations you're part of, and tell people, this is what I'm trying to do. I want to make a difference. This is where I can where I think we should improve, and make the case for people to support you. And start with your own cultural circle, raise as much money as possible to get out of the gate looking strong and competitive. Then people will take you seriously, right? You don't have to file for candidacy before you raise some money just to show people that you are viable. And once you are viable, you can have the money to hire a campaign manager to, and get some stuff printed and have a credible website, have consultants and all that kind of thing. And then you can register as a candidate. So then people will take you seriously, because you don't want to be running an totally unprepared and irrelevant campaign just to put your name out there. We have people like that, right, who just perpetually run and never win anything because they are never serious. They don't work hard to make themselves look like a credible candidates. And that's the last thing we want, because it hurts everyone's credibility and our community's credibility if you're not serious about that. You have to be serious about the amount of sacrifice you are willing to make, and you have to be serious about how much work you're willing to do, to get elected.
Okay, we are down with our, we are talking about through me and our three guest speaker here. Now, we're getting to the question and answer. We have about 10 minutes. Let's keep the question short and our answer also short. I have, let me see, we may not be able to satisfy every question, but I'll try our very best. So Liu Haihao, you look a younger generation, so I'm gonna give you a privilege to be the first.
Thank you so much. Thank you for hosting this event and for sharing. It's really, really inspirational for for a young person like me. So my question was, what advice do you have for more specific advice perhaps for for younger people? I'm thinking perhaps one thing you mentioned is like family, right? And as a young how can we make use of sometimes we have more freedom in that respect, right? How can we best make use of that to get involved and to make our voices heard? Thank you.
Liu, you want to start, or Lily?
Why don't you start?
Maybe Lily, you can start.
Okay, all right, fine. I would say yes, before you have family responsibilities and all of that, this is a great time as a young person because you are more flexible and mobile. You can be more nimble in moving to a different state if necessary to help run a presidential campaign, for example, right? You could be a volunteer for a few weeks, So check out, for example, the national campaigns that you care about. Because this next election is also going to be very consequential, the way it's shaping up. Many Americans are deeply worried about the state of our democracy. So this is a great time to be involved. I would encourage you to sign up to do something as a volunteer. Sometimes after you volunteer for a while, people want to pay you because you're so good at doing one of the two things or whatever, one of the many things, for example, right? And people will realize the kind of talent you have. So you can, sign up to be a delegate from your congressional district. And that means you will, go to the national convention, whether it's Democrat convention or Republican convention. And so there are many different ways. It depends on how much time you have and how deeply you want to be involved. But I encourage you to get involved in some campaign to learn the rope before you jump in yourself.
我赞同 Lily 说的是吧？就是说，还好你的想法非常好。我觉得2点吧，第一个就是说做志愿者是吧？你这志愿者可以说是社区的，并不一定非得是政治相关的。第二个，帮助人campaign，这个你会直接了解到经验，看人家怎么运行的，对不对？就是人家怎么运作的，接着其实我们都是非常聪明的人，一学就会。所以只要 get involved, you will learn a lot of stuff. And then if you decide to run, right, give me a call. I would love to talk with you.
And Haihao, contact UCA first, okay? We'll figure that out for you, hopefully. Yeah. Shall we move to our next question?
Please.
let's keep it short so that we have more people. I'm trying to figure out who raised hand first. I think I remember TJ Lee.
Yes,
and maybe
thank
Jack
you so
can
much.
be the next be prepared. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much to the moderator and all the panelists. So you guys are certainly trailblazers. I have a question regarding sort of, political parties. Obviously, all of you guys are Democrats, and that's great. Now, I understand that historically, Democrats try to cater more toward minorities. However, given what they stand for in education, I personally don't know that they're necessarily good for Asians. Republicans historically have not really reached out to minorities, but where I am, our congressional representatives actually have a lot of Latino and Black representatives from the Republican Party. So what I wanted to say is that times are different now. So here's my question for you guys. Even though you are Democrats, you don't necessarily have to agree with everything that your party stands for, I'm pretty sure. So what is one thing that you would rather change in terms of what's going on in the Democratic Party? And the second part of the question is that, is there something that the Republican Party can change that would make you feel more aligned with the Republican Party? Love to get your thoughts. Thanks so much.
Yeah, great question, TJ. But first, do you mind telling me which city are you in, or which county?
Well, I'm actually I'm not in Maryland. I'm down south. I'm in Texas.
Where?
I'm in Texas.
Okay.
Lily, you want to go first?
All right, I'm always first.
Maybe 30 seconds.
All right.
Let's do
Yes,
30
that's fine.
seconds.
No, it's a question I struggled with personally for a long time, including during my campaign, right? If there was one thing I wish my Democratic Party could change, it is not taking immigrants for granted and not mistake us as minorities, because we think differently and we are an untapped resource for the Democratic Party that could be leveraged. My campaign leverages so many new voters and turned them into Democrats. If my little campaign can do it, the party can do a much better job not taking us for granted, and also and I wish my party was also more business friendly and care more about growing the economy. I think that's a weakness, honestly. But I think the Republican Party today has turned into a very different party from what we thought it would be. I do not agree with its platform, and it just like Dr. Chao said, it looks different from people like you and me. And if there's one thing I wish that party would change, is more inclusive, right? Not just in rhetoric, but in reality, because it just doesn't look like today's America, especially on their position about women and their right to abortion and LGBTQ rights. I feel very strongly about these issues. I don't want government to have such a direct say about women's rights to choose and how LGBTQ people should live their lives. So for the sake of my respect for American freedom, I just cannot condone with that party's platform.
TJ， 我觉得你这个问题其实挺好的，因为可能也是很多人的 struggle， 对不对？就是说，对我个人来说，其实你想哪个 party 都无所谓，对不对？你想 Democrat 你就 Democrat， 你想 Independent 就 Independent， 你想 Republican 就 Republican。我觉得这道问题，我们有时讨论这个问题的时候是在内耗。什么叫内耗呢？好像说为了我的观点正确，所以我就要非得打倒你另外一片，觉得你共和党不好，或者觉得你民主党不好。我觉得我们现在最大的问题就是要 get involved。是吧？如果我们在外围老是讨论哪个党不好，哪个党好，其实最重要的时候，我们能做什么来改变这个，对不对 ？We need to be at the table. That's something we are missing， 是吧？我不管你是民主党、共和党，我希望我们有更多的 Chinese American at the table, make an impact on the policy level。这是我觉得我需要 promote 还有鼓励大家参与的一个最重要的原因。也就是非常感谢 UCA 这个平台，就是说希望更多的人 get involved， 是吧？不管你是民主党、共和党、无党派，最重要的是什么？参与。
对，这个问题提的挺有意思的，就是说，我现在开车啊，有点 background，有点 noise，就是 partisan politics is very real, right? The higher level you go, the more partisan it gets. That's just the reality of American politics, right? 就是我们在 council 的时候，就基本上没什么 partisan politics, right? You make a decision on the roads, on the parks, on garbage pickup, and right, not much politics going on. Once you get into state legislature, and right, everything is about politics, right? You have great ideas, and the other party just won't hear it, just because it's sponsored by a Democrat, right? It doesn't matter how good the idea is, right? And not every Democrat legislator will like every position that the party takes, right? The Democratic caucus takes. Agree with the caucus positions 100% of the time, absolutely, but the reality is every legislator, right? 他们现在就是因为就是这个选区的画图呢，基本上你这个图画出来之后呢，你这个 partisan line 就出来了，就是说90%甚至95%的选区，要么就是个民主党的选区，要么是个共和党的选区，所以这个 candidate 他 worry 的不是 general election， 因为这已经是个要么就是民主党的选区，要么是共和党的选区，他就是 worry 的就是这个 primary， 就是说只要你跟党一起投票，你就不会 worry about primary。That's just the reality. 所以我就想让大家知道，就是说每个 legislator 呢，他都有 pressure， 有的时候他投票的时候呢，他有时候不仅仅是自己，就是 what they believe in, right? And sometimes you just have to get in line. That's just the reality, right? And you vote as a block. I'm sure that's the case for Maryland. That's the case for every state legislature, and for most of the votes, I mean, it's just just have to vote with the party. And there are difficult votes for each and every one of us, right? Not every time you just agree with, and it can be a difficult vote, right? Yeah, I just want to share that perspective with you.
Okay, next, Jack, keep the question short.
是我吗？
对，这个你好。
你好，我是那个迈阿密佛罗里达，就是我就问一下那个什么，你们三位我真的觉得很敬佩你们，因为我觉得第一代移民那个竞选就是特别难，我也想知道你们是怎么样，就是你们能具体的说一下是怎么样那个选上的吗？因为我自己也曾经在那个小说的 board 做过，就是我们那小说也有很多中国人，但是中国人真的不喜欢投票。我们其实现在在这佛罗里达这边也想组织一个那个聚会抗议那个 SB264，也是那个我们 local 的那个中国人，因为这个 SB264大家都知道，就是禁止中国人那个买房，然后那个如果买房的话会坐牢的，立法会生命。所以我就想，就是说你怎么样，就是在这么困难的一个作为第一代移民，在这个困难的一个情况下，怎么样就是竞选那个成功的，就是说的具体一点，就会可能更好一点。就是我记得可能很多中国人也想，就是第一代移民想竞选那个就是从政那样子。
对，我竞选就是Kerry 市议会的时候呢，因为就 Kerry 市议会，我可能是第一个就是 woman of color ever to be elected to the Kerry Town Council. It was a all white board， 对吧？就是说，就是没有人就是 break into that circle， 就是 incumbents keep getting elected， 就是我们就是当时就是 clearly underdog， 基本上没有 endorsements， 因为觉得怎么可能会赢，又是一个。这个就是新移民这个 background， 对吧？当时我们就是靠就是华裔就是社区的力量去扫街，我们扫了就几千户吧。但是我就说我的经历就是说，我们当时也是扫了很多亚裔的那个票，但是我就是 looking back， 就是我觉得就是亚裔的票就特别难扫。如果就是说，其实就是。你如果是你有自己的这个团队的话，那么很多你的就是 supporters 可能都是华裔或者亚裔，那么但是你的选票并不是来自华裔和亚裔的选票，你知道吧？就是因为大部分可能都是美国选民的选票，所以就是说你是依靠华裔和亚裔的这个力量，但是呢，你要就是着重的就是扫美国社区的这个票，这就是我觉得就是 winning strategy. It's my advice.
We need to keep an answer short to that, please.
Lily, 你的事。
So it's a very long, it could be a very long answer. I'm going to just say it might be a good idea to have a separate session down the road for people who are serious about running for office, for the three of us to share some specific tips and ideas, because there's probably not something most people will actually do. But generally at very high level, I ended up having to run 2 different campaigns, right? Focusing on turning out the reliable Democratic voters, because those are voters were what I needed to win, but also at the same time in carving out a niche to engage the Chinese immigrant community so that my cultural base wouldn't lose the opportunity to learn about democracy, about how everything would work, because that was the purpose of me running, which is to speak for them and which was to represent them. I didn't want to just go ahead and run my own campaign without engaging my own community, but that made it just extraordinarily difficult. But also what was so fascinating and also meaningful at the end of the day, because it felt like it was not just a win for me, it was a win for our community.
我觉得有3点，我只要说，第一个就是你的 message， 你相信什么，是吧？如果说很多人不相信投票了，这种你就不用去 run office， 对不对？如果你相信投票还是民主政治，是吧？这是第一点。第二个，我觉得说，就是 what's your message， 这个很重要。你要说，千万要记住，你的亚裔选民只是你的一小部分，对于大部分人来说，是吧？亚裔选民只是我们的一小部分。What's the message for the bigger community? Who are your voters？ 是吧？就是了解这一点，他们关心的是什么问题？如果你平时不参加社区，你对这些完全不了解，当然非常难。但是如果你平时在做 volunteer， 参与社区的各种活动，是吧？接着去参加一些 political event， 你就知道大家感兴趣的什么，是吧？这是第二个。第3个就是说 team operation， 我觉得我们有个好处就是对 data 非常敏感，是吧？你可以看一下 data 投票选民投票的数据，看怎么分布的，怎么样，哪些人可能是你要 reach out 的。就是有针对性的去敲门投票，是吧？这3点做起来，我觉得我们每个人都可以成功。但是当然非常有challenge，但是就是可以做得到的。就是我来说，我第一次 run 是最难的，因为我们所有的人，我其实2次 run 我没有说 hire campaign manager，everyone is a volunteer， 是吧？所有的人都是政治素人，但是我们做到了，为什么？因为我们第一是 understand our strengths。And understand our shortcomings， 是吧？了解我们的长处，了解我们的弱点，接着把长处发展到最大，克服弱点。第二个就是 hard work、ground work， 是吧？你需要 volunteer 志愿者来帮你敲门、发传单，没有什么捷径。
Okay, I have next for 陆晨晨嘛。Then the last one is Lilian. I apologize, we couldn't get everybody in. We are already 10 minutes running after time. Thanks.
好，太感谢了。我是教育学专业的一个博士生，来自印第安纳。然后我的问题很简单，就是学校和老师如何鼓励有移民背景的孩子，特别是亚裔，更多的参与民主政治。然后我知道今天时间比较宝贵，如果你愿意接受我后面的采访的话，也可以跟我说一下，就是这样，谢谢。
你可以跟我们联系一下，好吧？呀，
那你的问题，
对。
Lily, go first. Go.
Go first. Why don't you go first?
Okay, I start. Okay. 我记得这个问题，其实看你说你针对的应该是估计是 K-12 学生，是这个意思吗？就是说 K-12 吗？
对，是的。
K-12 的其实很多机会，对不对？学校有各种 club， 这种 club 可以 leadership， 是吧？有些不一定是说非常直接的。我记得我们有个误区，就是不要参加任何东西都想着有直接的立竿见影的效果，对不对？这是说，哎呀，我参加 club， 我就一定要当 club president， 将来我要竞选什么的 ？No， 不要这样的想，是吧？你所有的事情只是一个经历，经历过程中得到这种经历，将来你要做什么？这种经历会给你给你 strength， 对吧？给你 strength， 给你 courage， 就够了，是不是？你叫孩子参与，不管是 SGA 或者一个 club， 是吧？这些东西都是非常重要的，千万不要想着我默默无闻的坐在后面被人立的，将来哪一天我突然跳出来，我能立的别人，这个是比较难的，对不对？
Yeah, I couldn't agree with more. I think you start with your interest, start with where you can add some value, and it will lead to unexpected opportunities. Just like adults, you know, the students are the same. There are multiple clubs, and you can even start your own club. It's not for college application. It's for learning about life, right? That process itself is so valuable. It helps you discover yourself. That's the ultimate prize you get, which is you discover more about yourself that you didn't know, what you are passionate about, what you can do, what you're capable of, or what you don't care about. It's all part of the learning and growing experience. And especially as Asians and immigrants, I think bullying is a serious issue. You know, the more you engage, the more you take up visible roles, the more people respect you. So it benefits everyone.
就是 youth civic engagement， 我一直非常就是如果有这样的，就是一般来邀请我去跟他们讲话的话，就是不管我有多忙，我都会去。我们的 office 也会组织一些就是 youth 这种 forums leadership forum， 让他们就是跟就是一些 elected official 有一些互动的机会，比如说可以提问。然后让他们了解这个 policy making 是什么样的 process。当然，这个 office 也有很多 intern， 我知道那个吴超也是就是组织这些 intern 的活动。我们像州议会也有一些 house page 的 program， 就是不仅我的 office 我都用完了名额，然后求我们的那个同事也去多分给我名额，他们用完的，然后也去求那个 speaker 的 office 多给几个名额，就给我们学生这些机会。然后呢，就是除了他们自己在学校里面有这些 club 的机会，他们也可以直接 reach out to 这些 political candidates， 就是尤其是 Asian American candidates， 就是你 volunteer。我们的那个 campaign 就有一些就是很小的学生，初中生、高中生都会去扫街，然后家长会带着他们，帮他们就是发传单，就是跟陌生人说话也是很大的锻炼。
Okay, the last question, as I said, Leland, please.
I think
Leland, are you available?
他好像不在，你要不换一个人，最后一个人。
Okay, 那就是 sorry about that. How about 韩愈
Hello.
Yeah.
我这问题比较简单，就是你们平均每一个星期，我只说平均啊，因为有的时候你们会花多一点时间，有时候花少一点时间。你们平均每一个星期花多少个时间在你们这份工作上？因为我觉得这份工作应该是一个 part time， 你们的 pay rate 大概是5万多，我知道马里兰是这个数字。就是你们大概其就是平均花多少多少小时在这份工作上。另外，你们的竞选经费大概其实需要多少？你们是4年1届，我知道。那个 North Carolina 我没有查，只查了马里兰的。
I can go first. So 我想 school board 的时候工资是1万5，对不对？这个就告诉你，那更低了。但是一周工作估计20到30小时。但是很多会议都是晚上开，所以基本说跟工作可以错开。但是现在 state delegate 来说，就像你说的，工资5万多，是个 part time job， 但是有3个月的时间是基本是 full time 的。所以就说你要想，就说你的工作能不能比较 flexible。时间来说 ，in session 的时候非常忙 ，off session 的时候相对来说比较轻松。
你们那个竞选经费你大概是需要多少？
对，我竞选 school board member 是到底花了4万块钱，竞选 delegate 花了9万块钱，这个你可以多可以少，对不对？花2万块钱也能赢。
你们的那个 county 就是我记，你们一个是第9选区，一个是第15选区。你们第9选区有多少选民呢？第15选区多少选民
？2个选区都是，就是选民一般的一个选区是8万选民，对吧？丽丽，6万到8万，有些。
那你们是得了多少票呢？
我得了1万7。
行，我们不再具体讨论了，好不好？这个 那个管耀还有话要回答这个问题。
This kind of information, 你可以在网上可以查到的。You just Google each of us, our voters, our district. Every district is equal in our population size, but of course, voter turnout is different. And most voters who voted for us are Democrats, right? So you can look up from the 2022 voting records from Maryland Board of Elections.
管耀 have anything to say on that? Or 没有了，他可能在开车。管耀 ，Go ahead， 管耀。
OK， 就是我想他问的问题就是说，因为我们可能都是 part-time legislator， 其实是 full-time legislator， 花费很长的时间。然后呢，就是你的工作必须有一定的 flexibility， 又花费很长。比如说我们周末，那么基本上每个晚上都有很多的 events， 很多的活动。你去参加这些 events， 你必须 build relationships，build coalition， 对吧？你是 support 其他的 candidates， 然后这些 candidates 才会 support 你的 community， 所以花费很多这样的时间。所以就是一个 public service， 也就是对 family time 真的是一个很大的 sacrifice。然后我们的 legislator 这也是很多为什么就是有很多的 young people can't do it, right? Like many retirees do it. I serve in the legislature, serve in Congress, and just would love to see more young people to run for office and contribute to our community. But it's a part of the reality. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. That's the end of this it's a session, and can we give the three of our great speakers applause? Somehow I don't know how to do that electronically. Thank you, and thank you for our audience. I was worried a little bit because this is the first time we organize a topic on, very boring topic of politics and elected officials, and it turned out to be we have about 400 people to attend today's event, which is a rare thing. As you know, webinars now become there's a generalized fatigue about webinars. And I was telling my colleagues that if we can have 100 people actually attending, I'll be very happy. But turned out to be 400 people, more or less. I want to thank everybody for that. I want to thank our staff, many of our board members, including our chairman, and everybody's here. And we are going to do a better job in the future. And for those of you who are interested in our work, please join UCA. Please become a member. We need your help, and you need us too. And if there's a demand, we could think about doing another session with maybe 3 Republican elected officials running the city council on a different level. And that could be the case if there's a demand for that. I really hope that we will engage each other. We will be engaged in this democracy, and we need to really step up big time. Otherwise, our community is in big trouble. So thank you all for coming for today, and thanks again for our great speakers. Aren't they wonderful? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.